And so one of the limitations is that we require one app per origin, where an origin is made up of the protocol, the subdomain, the domain, and the port. And so those 4 variables, you can change any one of those, but we uniquely identify an app in the operating system based on its origin. So for instance, if you're using Github Pages to host any kind of assets, I would recommend creating a new organization for each application because of all the stuff. For a GitHub page of your own project, it will be like your GitHub username github.io/your project. So that's a recommendation. And so the manifest, here is the MDN page which has all the documentation, a really simple, minimal example, and talks about all the different fields. But this manifest file is just JSON encoded. You can see here's an example, and this is what it looks like to create one. So you can see here I give the application a name, Firefox OS presentation, version, description, developer, where to find the icons, and I would like to make the app full screen when it's on the phone. And so there's various permissions, and it's really simple. It's just JSON. And so what's important though is that you serve it with the correct MIME type. If it's not served with the correct MIME type, the operating system won't install it. The MIME type being application X web app manifest plus JSON. So. And again, it's just JSON. It's important that you run it through JSON lint. Trailing commas I don't think are valid, which catch up a lot of people. So JSON lint your manifest, just in case. And we do have review tools when you submit a manifest to a marketplace that will actually catch that. And so I had mentioned earlier that GitHub, if you choose to host your assets on GitHub, you can, GitHub will actually serve your manifest.web app file with the correct manifest, with the correct MIME type. So if you have an entirely client-side application, you can actually just create a GitHub page for it and host it there. And if you're not familiar with GitHub Pages, what you can do for any repository is you can create a new orphan branch, meaning it doesn't share common ancestry with any other commit, and you can just dump HTML in there, and GitHub will host your assets for you. So for instance, my blog is hosted at GitHub. It's just a GitHub page, and but you're not solely required to host just client-side applications, right? There are companies out there that provide backend as a service or even database as a service, and so you can entirely have an application that's out there that's on the web where you don't do any of the hosting yourself or worry about any of that. It's host the client-side assets on GitHub and pay someone else to handle the backend code. And so as part of all the dev tools that we're trying to provide, we have all of our Firefox Dev Tools that have been getting a lot of attention recently, and one of the ones that I use quite a bit when developing for mobile is our responsive design view. So here it's in one of the web developer tools. I like to use the hotkeys for it, but so one of the things is I find this really useful for developing for mobile because it allows me to specify a custom screen size and kind of change around the way the app looks and see it in real time. Not too many devices can change their screen size like this, so it's very interesting to kind of see like, oh, what would it look like on an actual phone, or if it was rotated, or maybe on like something like a tablet, for instance, or whatever. So I find that very useful. Oops, sorry. Also, we have various add-ons for Firefox. That's always been a big part of the Firefox browser. I still jump into Firebug occasionally. I like it a lot. Of course, this is all still just the web, so if you prefer other browser vendors, dev tools, those work as well. And also the simulator, of which I am a contributor. So we have a whole bunch of documentation on that. It is just another add-on for Firefox. You can go and download it either from this page directly or the GitHub repo where it's hosted. Code name for it is R2D2B2G. Or from the listing of the add-ons. But we also do preview builds of which your install won't automatically update, so you have to fetch those from the FTP server. it's linked to in the repo. But so for instance, this is what the simulator looks like, right? So anyone can go right now and go and download this and play around with Firefox OS. You can see here, you can just fire it right up. And there's, I can also connect the Firefox Dev Tools to it as well. And so here you can see I can play around. It will do some validation of my apps for me. So you can see, for instance, this one is no longer being hosted somewhere, which is what the error is. So that is a simulator which we are putting a lot of hard work and love into. And also, as part of the developer ecosystem, we are providing reference documentation for everything we do. So, of course, there's the Mozilla Developer Network, which has tons of information about CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. But we're also adding quite a bit to it in regards to Firefox OS. So you can see here we have a whole page with various topics. Everything that I'm speaking about today is covered in depth, definitely more throughout the documentation. We have our developer hub, our Marketplace developer hub, which also has various documentation as well, and talks more about the marketplace in general. There are sometimes some useful tidbits on the Mozilla Wiki that don't always get moved over to the Mozilla Developer Network, so that is a resource to be aware of. And also the Mozilla Hacks blog. Usually every week we have a bunch of interesting posts about working with Firefox OS and different applications and stuff that people have created with that. So that's also a very useful reference. I'm sure if we take a look at it now, there's probably some. Yeah, there you go. And so we want to help developers monetize their app. One of the things that we're looking to do to try and differentiate ourselves as a platform as far as payments go is carrier billing. So a lot of these people in these new markets that we're targeting, like they don't have, credit cards aren't as prevalent as they are, say, here. A lot of people don't use credit. Credit's frowned upon, or credit cards just aren't an established industry in these places. But you know, these people, they do pay this, they manage to pay their cell phone bill, right? So carrier billing, what it is being able to get paid for your application, but when they pay, it shows up on their cell phone bill, right? And they pay at the end of the month. So that's something new that we're working very hard with carriers to do. And so we've also created the Firefox Marketplace. As part of the design, we're looking to make it so that, you know, we don't just have to have our one marketplace and have it be locked down and we're in control and only what we say goes. Like, we have our developer terms of service, and if you violate those, like, we won't list your app, but that doesn't stop you from just creating your own marketplace, and users can go there and can install applications from it. So it's entirely possible, you know, if Amazon or Google or anyone else wanted to create a marketplace, they could. Our marketplace was just recently redesigned, and you can see here, I like it a lot because they did a lot of hard work into making it really nicely done as far as the responsive design goes. So you can see, like, Twitter here is listed as just one application, and over here it's in multiple lists and stuff. So as part of monetizing it, we're supporting doing paid apps where users pay up front for the app, and also supporting in-app purchases. And so with paid applications, when an application is installed, a receipt object is linked to the installed app record. And so we provide a receipt verifier library where if you expect your app to be paid for, we provide a service that will verify the receipt, but you need to contact our service and say, is this receipt still valid? And so it was originally a client-side library, very well written. I myself ported it to Node.js, so you should be doing validation server-side. But again, that's up to you on how restrictive you want to be with your content, and you know, how actively you choose to pursue preventing piracy. But we also have a lot of documentation on the paid app process, and we also offer a service that will give you test receipts So as you are developing, you can give yourself a receipt that will say, I'm a valid receipt, but I'm a developer receipt, and in production, you shouldn't allow me to get verified. And so I'm actually currently right now trying to tie this service into the simulator, so you can just test it right from the simulator. And then the next is in-app payments, where you are required to run your own backend for this. The client would basically request what's called a JSON web token from your server that's cryptographically encoded. You call this new API navigator.mozpay and pass it the JSON web token, and the Mozilla service will then contact your server, and then you transfer the paid-for content. And so this is a little illustration that I did when I was making a little demo here. You can see that the client starts off making the request for sorry, it's actually a JSON web token, not JavaScript. Oops. But then the server will reply with that. The client calls Mozpay with the JSON web token. The Mozilla service then contacts back your server and says, okay, I handled the transaction and money has flowed from the client to your account. It's safe to transfer the assets, and then you go ahead and transfer them. And of course, we provide documentation on all that as well. Also, if you're looking to set up authentication, a new service that we are providing is called Persona. Persona is very interested in protecting user privacy and kind of preventing the site that you're signing up with from knowing too much exactly about who specifically you are. So that is a service with documentation as well and a quick setup guide, and it's actually really easy to implement. For a hackathon that my buddies and I partook in, we were able to set up authentication for our test application really quickly. So it's certainly very easy to work with and smooth. And then we also provide what's called web activities. I'm told that this is something similar from the Android world, but I don't know too much about that. So what it allows you to do is it allows you to have applications that communicate to each other. So you can say in your manifest, my app will emit this type of web activity, and you can have another application say, I listen for this type of web activity. And so, you can say, go fetch an image from the gallery app, right? And it will pull up the gallery app, and the user can choose an image, and then it will return the file handle to you, the file URL. Or you can create two applications where doing something in one application opens another application and passes data amongst them. So it's a safe method for communicating across applications even. And so some of my personal observations, don't assume connectivity, right? As like a web developer, testing on your local machine from like localhost on like your solid state drive and like your high-end laptop, that's literally like the perfect case, right? And like mobile is anything but the perfect case. Like latency is out of control, and I think one of the things that we do as web developers is we kind of confuse sometimes like the web from the internet, and like the mobile web tries to separate those, right? So we're still developing web applications, but we may or may not actually have an internet connection at the time. So we need to think about what happens when the user tries to load my app and they're going through a tunnel. Does nothing happen? There's all kinds of caching layers that we provide in the browser on top of application cache and local storage and cookies and IndexedDB and the various HTTP caching headers. So make sure that you test your app offline. It's very important for the user experience. Another thing is that bandwidth is not free on mobile. If you've ever been to a site where like you'll see it make many HTTP requests and download like megabytes of assets, like no mobile user should be subjected to that. Really try and think about the size of your assets, cutting down images, cutting down on some of the libraries. Libraries are great, but there's a trade-off with everything you do, so make sure that you're aware of it. There's no browser Chrome in an application, so if you get around in your app by clicking back, that is not a web application. that providing UI in your app is very important. So like for instance, the navigation bar, back button, that's what we refer to as the browser's Chrome. And so in a web application, you'll see like you don't actually get that. Another thing is that small inputs really hurt. So creating areas, entire areas where users can click is very important. Anything where they have to type a lot is really painful, especially for people with big thumbs. So be aware you don't have the entire real estate, and when you do, like just because your screen may be like a super high resolution doesn't mean the phone will, and which means like your buttons will be smaller than what you see on your screen. And so one of the things that I recommend, does anyone here know much about responsive design? So responsive design is still somewhat like of a new topic, right? And it's kind of like talking about, instead of having a completely different mobile site with completely different assets, all sharing the same assets, but using something like CSS rules to filter out, apply all these rules when the screen size is, a reasonable size for a phone, apply a different set, maybe if it's about a tablet size screen, and then a completely different set of CSS rules, right? So think about like the CSS Zen garden, right? Like the same content, just laid out completely different or not displayed based entirely upon the screen size.